welcome to your first project. In this project, we're going to be building a very simple application or website using Node.js. Okay, I wanted to keep it very minimal just to show you exactly how it works. We're going to build a web server, but we're not going to use Express or anything. We're going to do it just right from scratch with no special third-party modules like Express. All right, and what we're actually doing is if we go to nodejs.org and we click on the About page, it gives us this really simple web server that basically just spits out hello world. Well, we're going to take this and we're going to build upon it to make it an actual HTML server that will serve HTML web pages. Okay, and you can also see that we've implemented Twitter Bootstrap to make it look good, and we're on the welcome page. If I click About, it takes us to About HTML, Services, takes us to Services HTML, and of course you could keep adding pages to it. Okay, so that's what we'll be doing in this introduction project, and I'll see you in the next video. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and set up our environment for our first project. Now we're going to install Node.js, and we're also going to install a tool called Git Bash, which is a command line tool for Windows that will give you a couple other features that the standard command line doesn't have, but in no way is it required. You can use the standard Windows command line or your terminal in Linux or Mac or whatever you'd like to use. Alright, so to download Node.js, we're going to go to nodejs.org and click on the latest stable version. Okay, I already have it here, but you'll want to download it, and then we're going to open that up. Alright, so we're going to run it, and it's just like any other Windows installer. We're just going to kind of go through it, click Next, accept the agreements, and the default folder is the program files folder, which is fine. We're going to keep all the defaults. It's going to add to path, alright, so we'll be able to access Node and NPM from the command line from anywhere. Alright, so we'll install that. Alright, so that's finished, and that's all there is to it. We now have Node on our system. Alright, next thing is going to be the Git Bash tool, and you want to go to gitscm.com, and again, you don't need this. It's just a tool that I like to work with in Windows. Alright, I'm going to click this Downloads for Windows, and we're going to go ahead and download that file. Alright, so that's all set. Let's go ahead and run it. Again, this is just a simple Windows installer. Okay, we're going to put it in the program files folder, and this stuff can all stay default. This option here, I'm actually going to choose the last one. This is going to allow us to use some extra Unix tools from the Windows command prompt. Alright, so we'll select that, and then the rest of these we'll just keep default. Okay, so that's all set. I'm going to uncheck that, click Finish, and we should have this on our desktop. Well, it usually adds it. Alright, that's fine, so we'll just go ahead and search for it. Git Bash, and I'm going to pin to the start. Actually, no, we'll just bring it. It didn't pin. Alright, that's fine. We'll just go to the actual shortcut, and let's see. I'm going to bring it down here into my taskbar. Alright, so we can now access it from here, and another cool thing that this does is, let's see, if we want to, let's say I'm going to create a folder called Projects in my C drive. Alright, and if we want to open the command line in this folder, all we have to do is right click, and we have a couple context menus here. Okay, so we want to say Git Bash here, and that's going to go ahead and open up the command line for us in that folder. Alright, and we can use commands like ls and other Unix based commands. Now, just to make sure that Node was installed, we can say node v. Okay, that's going to tell us our version number. Also NPM, we want to check that. and that looks good. Alright, now NPM we'll get into later on. It stands for Node Package Modules, and it's basically just a package manager so that we can add and remove plugins or modules to and from our application. Alright, so that's going to be it for now. In the next video we'll look into NPM more, and we'll also look at a basic HTTP server using Node.js. Alright, so now that we have Node.js installed on our system, we're going to take a look at some very simple code, and we're also going to talk a little bit about NPM and what that is. Alright, so first of all, let's go to the nodejs.org website and click on the About link up here. Alright, so this is going to give us a really simple example of an extremely simple web server that is basically just going to serve up some text for us. Alright, so let's take a look at the code here. This first line we have const HTTP. So what this is, we're just defining a variable called HTTP, and we're defining it as a constant, alright, because it's not going to change. And we're setting that to require HTTP. And what this does, it's including the HTTP module. Okay, whenever you see require, it's either including a module or it's including another file. Alright, then here we have hostname and port constants. Okay, our hostname is going to be our local host, and then port is 1337. Alright, down here we're taking that HTTP module and using the create server method or create server function, and that takes in a request and response parameter. Down here we're using the write head method of the response, and we're giving it a status of 200, which means everything's okay, and we're also setting the content type to text/plain. Alright, and then here we're going to end the response, and we're just going to basically just echo out hello world in the browser. Alright, and then we have to say .listen and pass in the port and host name. Alright, and then once that happens, we can just console log, letting the user know that the server is running. Alright, so that's what this piece of code does. It's very, very simple, and we're actually going to run it and see how it works. Alright, before we do that, I just want to go over to npmjs.com and show you this website. It's basically a repository for all of the Node package modules. Alright, so you have modules that are extremely simple, all the way up to a module like Express, which is an entire HTTP server and framework. Alright, which we'll get into later on. Now you can install these from your command line. If you have Node installed, you also have NPM, and we'll get into that a little later. Alright, so what we're going to do is I'm going to open up, let's see, a folder. I'm going to go to my, actually I want to go to my C drive. Alright, and then I have a folder there called projects. Alright, and I'm going to create another folder in here called simple server. Alright, so this will be our application folder. Now, all of our Node applications need to have a file called package.json, which is a JSON file that holds a lot of different information, such as the application name, description, and it also includes we have to list all the dependency modules that we want to use. So we could create that manually, but we can also use the command line. Alright, so I'm going to use my git bash tool and just go right into that folder. Alright, and what we'll do to create that file, we'll say npm init. Okay, that'll initialize a series of questions. So the app name, whatever's in parentheses, is the default, so that's fine, we'll keep that. Version, that's good. Description, we'll just say very simple server. Entry point, you could call this what you want. I like to call it server.js. Okay, you don't need any of those. Author, you could put your own name. Alright, so it's going to just verify that stuff, and we'll click enter. And now you'll see that we have this file package.json. So let's go ahead and open that up and take a look at it. I'm using Sublime Text, but of course you could use whatever editor you want. So you can see we have all that information, the name, version, all of that. Now, if we were using something like, let's say, Express or some other kind of Node module, we'd have to put that in our dependencies here. All right, but we'll get into that a little later. So we have our package.json file. Now let's go ahead and create the server.js. Alright, so we're going to open that up. I'm just going to make Sublime my default real quick. Oops, no, that's not what I want. Alright. So what we'll do is go to that About page and just copy this block of code. Alright, and we're just going to paste that in this file. And we're going to save that. And let's go back into our command line. And what we want to do is we want to say node and then the name of the file. You could either say server or you could do server.js. Alright, and you can see that now it's running. Let me just make this a little bigger. Alright, so server is running at, and then it's our local host, port 1337. Alright, so let's go ahead and check that out in the browser. So we can say localhost 1337. Alright, and we get hello world. So this is in fact a Node application that we're running. Now, a lot of times you'll see, instead of writing Node server, you'll see npm start. Alright, if I do that, it does the same thing. Alright. So you could either use node and then the file name, the base server file name, or npm start. So there you go. Very, very simple application. Doesn't do much. In the next video, I'll show you how we can actually serve HTML files instead of just serving some text like this. Alright, so we'll get into that next. Hey guys, in the last video we went ahead and took this very simple code off the Node.js website and put it into play, and we just have a very, very simple web server that's just spitting out some text at us. Alright, so what I want to do now is bring it up a notch, and we want to actually serve HTML pages, which is something that's closer to a real life situation. Alright, so what I'm going to do is right now just get rid of all of this. We'll keep the HTTP module because we still need that. Alright, we also need a couple other things, a couple other modules. So we're also going to say constant URL. I'm going to set that to require URL. Okay, we also want the path module. So we'll say path equals require path. Alright, and then we also want the file system module. So we're going to say const fs, and we want to set that to require fs. Okay, so we're bringing in these modules. Now what we're going to do is we want to set the type of files that we want to be able to serve. Alright, so let's say var, actually we can use a constant here. We'll say const mime types, and this is going to be set to an object. Alright, so we'll say HTML, and this will be text/HTML. Okay, we'll do JPEG, so that's image/JPEG. Also JPG. Alright, we'll say PNG. Okay, we want to be able to serve JavaScript files, so JS, and that's going to be text/JavaScript, and finally CSS. Okay, that'll be text/CSS. Alright, good. So now what we want to do is we want to use that create server function that we used before. So we want to say http.createServer, Alright, and then inside that we're going to have a function, and that's going to take in a request and response. Alright, and in here we're going to set a variable called URI, and we're going to use the URL module for that. We'll say url.parse. Alright, and then we want to pass in here request.url, and then we want to add on .pathname. Alright, just like that. Now we want a variable for the file name. So we'll say file name, and then we're going to use the path module. So path.join. And then in here we're going to say process.cwd. And that's a function. And then another parameter, which is going to be the URI. Okay, but we want to put that in an unescape function. Oops, URI. Alright, and then let's just do a console log. Okay, we're just going to say, whoops, I'm going to say loading, and then we can concatenate on the URI. Oops, just like that. Alright, and we're going to create a variable called stats. So now what we want to do is we want to check for the file that is entered. So for instance, if we go to, let's say /page.html, it has to check and make sure that that page HTML is actually there. Alright, so let's see, we're going to go right under this stats here, and we're going to do a try catch block. So we'll say try and catch. Alright, we can pass in an E. Alright, so what we want to try is we want to take that stats variable, and we're going to set that to fs, which is the file system module, and then we want lstatsync. Alright, and then we can just pass in the file name. Alright, now in the catch block we're going to so if this doesn't work, we want to send a 404 error. Alright, so we'll say res.writeHead. Alright, and then the status we want is 404. I'm going to send along the content type. Okay, so content type, that actually has to be in quotes. And that's going to be text/plain. Then we want to say res.write. And I'm just going to put in some text here. We'll say 404 not found. Alright, and then we're going to say res.end. And then return. Alright, so if it doesn't find the file, we're just going to send a 404. Now down here, we'll say if stats.isFile. Okay, so if there is a file, then let's set a variable called mime type. Actually, going to make that T uppercase, and then we're going to set that to mime types, which is our array, and then in here we're going to say path.extName, file name, and we're going to say dot split, and we want to split it at the dot. Alright, because what we're doing is we're getting the extension of the file. Okay, we're going to see if it's .html, .jpeg, whatever it may be. Alright, so that's what this xname does. And we want to split it at the dot. And then we're just going to say dot reverse. And we want the first one in the array, so that'll be 0. Alright, and we'll end that with a semicolon. So we'll get the MIME type, and then we want a response of 200, which means everything's good. So we'll say res.writeHead, and this will be status 200, and then we also want the content type. Okay, content type, and then we can simply put in the MIME type variable. Okay, then we're going to create a variable for the file stream. So we'll say var file stream, set that to the file system module, and we want a function called create read stream. Okay, and then we're going to pass in the file name. Alright, and then we need to say file stream dot pipe and then pass in the response. Alright, now all this stuff here we're not going to have to do in other projects, because we'll use something that does this on its own, like Express. Alright, Express is a framework that also has an underlying HTTP server, and we don't have to do all this. Okay, this is just an example to kind of show you what goes on under the hood of an HTTP server. Alright, so if any of this is a little confusing, don't worry about it. Chances are you won't have to do this. Alright, so what we did here is we were checking to see if it was a file or if it was a directory. Alright, if it was a file, then it's going to go ahead and serve that file. Now down here we're going to say else. Actually, we're going to say else if, because we want to check to see if it's a directory. So we'll say stats.isDirectory. Alright, just like that. If it is a directory, then let's say res.writeHead, and we want to pass in a 302. Alright, and then location, we're going to redirect it. So location is going to be index.html. Okay, if we're in a directory and there's no file name, it's going to automatically load index.html. And then we'll just say res.end. Alright, now finally we'll have an else here. And if it's not a file or a directory, we're going to send a 500 error, because obviously it's not there. Alright, so let's say res.writeHead. This is going to be a 500 error. I'm going to send content type. Okay, content type is going to be text plain. Res.write. Okay, and we're just going to say 500 internal error. We all love those. And then just put a line break like that. Alright, so that's it. And then at the end here, we have to say .listen. And let's listen on port 1337. Okay, so this is a web server. This will serve HTML pages as long as images and whatever else we have up here in the MIME types array or object. So let's save it, and we're going to have to restart the server. So let's go to our command line here, do a Control-C to stop it, and then say npm start, and we'll see what happens. Alright, so let's see, MIME type. Oh, this should be an equal sign. Okay, remember we don't have any files to load, so let's see what happens. Alright, so we're getting a 404 not found because we're looking for index.html. Alright, So what we will do is let's go create an index HTML. Okay, we'll open that up with Sublime, and we'll say, just put in some tags here. Okay, and our body will just put in an H1, make sure it parses HTML correctly. Let's save that, and let's go and reload, and we get testing. Okay, it's reading our HTML page. So if we create another one, we'll say page.html. Okay, we'll open that up. I'm going to copy this. We'll say testing page 2, save. And now if we go and change this to page.html, that's going to load up. So in the next video, we'll go ahead and create some more pages, and we'll link them together. We'll include some CSS files, and just test this server out a little bit more.